to another episode of Mr. V's Camping Chair Chat. My name is Mr. V, and I'm currently sat in a camping chair in an attic, a loft. Why? Well, we have just had the 2025 Spanish Grand Prix at the Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya. Just little pun for you there. You know, people have been saying this podcast maybe on for multiple awards this year. Best new comedy, breakthrough comedy, all of these, and you can see why. You can see why with lines like that. The entertainment value for you guys is absolutely off the charts. For those of you listening audio only, I am sat in a loft, in an attic. It's quite a creepy place to be for a period of time, just to sit still. You know, like a loft is, and don't get me wrong, like some houses you have like a loft conversion and it's just a room. No, this is like, you know, wood beams. There's a water tank behind the camera, which is just slowly dripping. I don't think you can hear it through the microphone, but it's creepy. It's a disconcerting place. You don't normally like hang around in places like this. You kind of come up here to get what you need to get, or to like put away some random boxes that you're never going to see again for the next 12 years, and then you leave. You don't normally set up a chair and kind of just hang out. There's a reason. There's a reason for that. Anyway, we have just had the 2025 Spanish Grand Prix, and it was pretty good. It was kind of like up and down through the race. There are periods of the race that were interesting through tyre strategy, but not out and out exciting. But a late safety car means a wild end to the Grand Prix. Some very shaken up results. Some very consequential things for our Drivers' Championship. Not necessarily at the very top. Spoilers, it's a very strong weekend once again for McLaren. But everything else a little bit messed up, a little bit just gone crazy today, which is kind of interesting. As always, for those of you new to the podcast, we normally kind of talk through the events of the week, then qualifying, then talk through the race, kind of chronological order, that kind of thing. And I give my views in a very ramblomatic kind of way. Will anything be factually accurate? Who knows? But are you going to have a good time? Yes, I hope. So, the third race of a triple header, we have just had the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix at Imola, then Monaco, and now the Spanish Grand Prix at Barcelona. Obviously, kind of like into the European leg of the season proper. This is race 9 of the championship. It feels like we're flying by already, a third of the way through this championship, and it feels like it only just started. Maybe partly that's just like in my life. I feel like this time of year, like stuff happens. You know, you move house and thing go on. But then kind of later in the year, things settle down. Formula 1 will not be settling down later in the year, though, because we are looking like we're going to be having a spicy championship battle till the very last, which is very nice. But yeah, it's been coming thick and fast, Formula 1 recently, through the month of May, even though we are now in June. I'm rambling. So, storylines of this week. The big one coming into this race, always had been planned for this race, is new regulations regarding flexi front wings. So this has been an ongoing thing in Formula 1 for a couple years now. Obviously, there's been like multiple changes to wing tests, wing deflection tests, you know, hanging weights off the wings to see how much they bend, the advantages that come with your wing flexing at speed. So basically it like tilts back and you get like a kind of static DRS. Even if you don't have DRS, you get less drag in a straight line, more downforce on a corner. Excelente. Formula 1 or the FIA is trying to cut down on flexi wings because it's getting close enough to being an active aero device, and we don't do that here in Formula 1. We have static aero devices that stay the same. So Formula 1's been trying to clamp down, and it was always planned for this weekend there would be new stricter tests and stricter regulations on front wings to clamp down on flexi front wings from the Spanish Grand Prix onwards. It was perceived going into this weekend that maybe we would see all new front wings from teams, that some teams would have a technical advantage cut into. The teams with the best flexi front wings were perceived to be McLaren and Mercedes, so people were suggesting that they were going to like massively drop down in their technical performance. We'd have a new pecking order. Maybe Red Bull would be fastest or Ferrari would be fastest. Long story short, no. nothing changed, really. Even teams like McLaren didn't even bring a new part. They just used the same part from previous races. Apparently, it already met the new regulations, so nothing really changed. So that was kind of a dud of a storyline, which is a bit of a shame. But these things happen sometimes. Sometimes very innocuous, very like simple technical changes have a huge impact. I'm thinking about like the little triangle that we cut off the floor for 2021, which had a huge impact on Mercedes' technical advantage. But then this was meant to be a big blow to McLaren, and it's done nothing. So that's fun. I guess other stories coming into this weekend. This is the second of Colapinto's 5 races off his supposed 5-race trial period with Alpine, where they will then be evaluating if they keep him on permanently. Once again, I believe the 5-race thing is purely political, and they have no intention of swapping him out for someone else at the end of this, unless he is incredibly disappointing or crashes the car loads. We'll talk about Colapinto a little bit later. But yeah, so not much going into this weekend. Again, obviously, it's only been a week since we're at Monaco, so there's not that much time for crazy stuff to happen. So let's get right into the on-track action. We'll skim through practice. Basically, McLaren was fastest in practice. Is anyone surprised by that? I would imagine not. The Spanish Grand Prix, specifically at the Circuit de Barcelona Catalunya, but it's been a long time since the Spanish Grand Prix was anywhere else. The Spanish Grand Prix is renowned for basically lining all the cars up in just like car performance order. So obviously, in general, that happens anyway in any race over the season. But some teams are strong in some places, some teams are strong in a straight line, and so tracks with like huge long straights are better for them. Some teams are better at low speed performance or whatever. All teams have their different strengths. But basically, the Spanish Grand Prix, the Circuit de Barcelona Catalunya, is such an all-rounder, generic, and that's not to say generic in a bad way, but like such a middle-of-the-road circuit that it just shows like general car performance. And we typically expect in practice and in quali and in the race here that it kind of just lines cars up in the order of who has the quickest car. And so we went through practice. McLaren was the fastest in basically all the practice sessions. Surprising, nobody. So we get to qualifying. It's basically a battle at the front between Norris and Piastri to see who's going to get pole, but some interest behind that. So we start off in Q1. People set their bank laps. Then we come for the second runs in Q1 with about 3 minutes left on the clock. A typical thing where every single car tries to go out at the same time. Colapinto gets into the pit lane, and then his car stops. And he says on the radio, like, can't get the car started. Alpine! The pit lane is not a fun place for Alpine this year. They keep having just stupid issues in the pit lane. Almost never in the race, though. Almost always, like, in practice and qualifying. But once again, just had a car break down in the pit lane. Like, what's going on at Alpine? So yeah, Colapinto kind of stranded there. Some drivers had to drive around him to get out the pits to do their final lap in Q1. Colapinto did get going for like half a lap, and then his car broke down in Q1. So he didn't really get to set a fast lap. He had set his banker, but it wasn't enough. So he went out P19 in qualifying, which is not good. The main story from Q1 is, once again, Yuki Tsunoda struggling with that Red Bull. So Yuki seems to be kind of okay in the Red Bull in a race. Obviously, in a race, you almost never drive your car absolutely 100% pace. That is reserved for qualifying hot laps only. But that time, when you're doing a quali hot lap and you drive the car the absolute limit of its grip, an absolute limit of what it can give out, that seems to be the time when all of the Red Bull drivers previous to Yuki Tsunoda as well have struggled with this car because it is a tricky car to drive. Yuki Tsunoda is once again struggling, and so in Q1 he had clean laps, but he cannot just string together a quick lap. Basically qualifies P20. Not ideal when your teammate is currently third in the Drivers' Championship and is a regular contender for like pole positions. Yeah, I mean, you can see if you watch Yuki's qualifying laps, he's like soaring away at the steering wheel mid-corner, lots of like longer, high, and dare I even say it, medium speed corners. At the Circuit de Barcelona Catalunya, lots of the time you're like in the corner for a while holding the steering lock. Obviously, the fastest way to do that is to turn in nice and smooth, hold your steering angle, very smooth on the steering wheel, one fluid motion, in, out, lovely stuff. Yuki Tsunoda turning it in, finding that he's like missing out on grip. You know, I just realized my microphone adapter has turned way down. If I do this, that's better. That's probably way more clear. Why was it like that? I must have just like knocked the knobs. I touched the knobs while moving the adapter up here. Never touched the knobs. Anyway, yeah, Yuki Tsunoda like not being able to just drive this car smoothly. He's having to make loads of adjustments mid-corner, and that just loses you time. That loses you time on every single corner. So yeah, he just cannot drive it in qualifying, which is a shame because he is fine in the race. He doesn't have the race pace of Verstappen, but like he's for the last few races been qualifying quite low down and then been making up places. Like he can get past people in the race. But yeah, Yuki Tsunoda P20, Franco Colapinto doesn't have a second flying lap in Q1, so qualifies P19. We have Carlos Sainz P18. That's one of the ones in this qualifying actually. Williams have also been doing so well recently, getting their cars in like P5s in some qualifying sessions, particularly in the hands of Albon, and have been like kind of expected now to get into Q3. Neither Williams looking particularly strong here in Barcelona. Once again, teams have strengths and weaknesses, and Williams does benefit a longer straight. Like, they have a much more all-round car this year than previous years, but still this year, and similarly to previous years, Williams is a low-drag, high-speed car, and while there is a decent length straight here in Barcelona, as I said, there's lots of long aerodependent corners, and so if you have less drag, you also just have less aerodynamic downforce. That's just not playing to their strengths here, and so Williams struggling a bit compared to previous races. Carlos Sainz qualifies P18. Alex Albon does a bit better, but can only qualify P11. Not looking ideal for them. Sainz 18. We have Ocon P17. Hulkenberg P16. And Oliver Behrman P15. We then go through to Q2, kind of actually quite uneventful Q2. All the usual names you would expect. So we have Oliver Behrman was in Q2, but he goes up P15. We then have Stroll P14, Lawson P13, Bortoleto P12, which is his best qualifying of his career. Congratulations, Gabriel. That's Sauber, actually. And we'll come on to this again in the race, but the Sauber has a trick or two up its sleeve here in Spain. Bortoleto showed us in qualifying when he was able to get it to P12, which is better than he's been doing previously. But both of them, and Hulkenberg particularly, was able to do some little bits in the race, and so we'll talk about that in a second, but looking good for Sauber. And then P11, last cut out in Q2, was Alex Albon. Our top 10 then, nothing too crazy in Q3. Fernando Alonso driving the absolute balls off that car. He's putting on a show for his home crowd here at the Spanish Grand Prix. He gets it into Q3. Sadly, can't do much more there because he is still in a Aston Martin that just doesn't have the pace of the other cars up at the front. So he qualifies P10, but still really good for him. Hadjar P9, kind of like it would take a force of nature to get Hadjar to qualify anywhere other than like P8, P9. Like, he has become a Q3 regular somehow. And yeah, it just refuses to qualify badly. So lots of people, I've seen some like talk this last week, some quotes from not just people within Red Bull, but people in the wider sport, talking about how Hadjar is maybe like the most promising rookie now on the grid, as Antonelli seems to have had like a number of not great races. He obviously had a good time in Miami, almost got pole position. But, you know, there's been just a string of performances from Kimi Antonelli, and obviously he's getting showed up by George Russell, but that's a tough teammate to beat. Hadjar, therefore, despite having a worse car, is looking like the best rookie on the grid, and at times is outperforming Kimi Antonelli, like, just flat out, despite the fact he has a worse car. So Isaac Hadjar, we shall watch his career with great interest, because it's going well once again. He qualifies P8. Leclerc P7, he actually doesn't go out for like a final flying lap in Q3. He does his first one and comes back in. The commentators at the time said Leclerc is happy with what he's done. That clearly was not the case. Clearly not. Because he was not even... It's not like he went on like P2 in his first flying lap and was like, oh, that was a great lap. No, he was like... He didn't have that great of a pace. There must have been some technical issue in the car and he just didn't go back out. I don't know what it was, but... Leclerc, just doesn't do a second flying lap in Q3 effectively. Qualifies P7, which is a little bit weird, which means he is out-qualified by Hamilton for only the... first time in an actual Grand Prix qualifying. It could be. Not going to fact check that, but it might be. Antonelli P6, Hamilton P5, Russell P4, but also Verstappen P3. Those two have the exact same qualifying time. Just Verstappen did his first. That's how that works. If you have the exact same time down to the 1,000th, it's first come, first serve. So Russell and Verstappen the exact same time, but Verstappen gets P3, Russell gets P4, Norris gets P2, but Oscar Piastri with 3 purple sectors sets the fastest lap of qualifying. Oscar Piastri is just... He's reaching new levels in 2025, and performances that he looked good in qualifying. Performances of that should worry Norris. I would say, Norris's strengths. He's been an excellent qualifier his entire career, and obviously his main advantage over Piastri last year was race pace, or his ability to keep tyres in a good window, let's say. So Oscar's obviously done a lot of work on his race pace. He was getting better and better throughout last year, and he's now very similar to Norris this year. But at least Norris would have taken some solace if he was still like the better qualifier of the two, similar to like a Charles Leclerc or George Russell, just like ultra dependable when it came to Q3, final flying lap. If he could just like regularly be one space ahead of Piastri, that would give him at least that mental advantage. No. Piastri's come along and he is rapid in qualifying this year. I would be scared if I was Norris, honestly. Piastri just is the full package now. So yeah, Piastri on pole. McLaren 1-2, surprising nobody. But behind that, some interesting bits indeed. And so, we get onto the race on Sunday afternoon. But actually, only 19 of our drivers come to the race on Sunday afternoon, because late on the evening of the Saturday following qualifying, Aston Martin announced that Lance Stroll will be withdrawing from the Spanish Grand Prix due to complications with his wrists, effectively, with his hands and his wrists. So obviously Lance injured his wrists. Oh my god, which event did he do that in? Or it might have even been like a biking accident. 1 second. Yes, it was a cycling accident for which he had surgery shortly before the start of the 2023 season. Those of you who were watching testing back at the time will remember that Lance Stroll did not take part in preseason testing that year. So basically, the team has released a statement that like Lance has been having like ongoing complications due to his wrist injuries and wrist surgeries from a couple years ago. Those have been plaguing him for like a long time. It's not to say that this has just happened again here in Spain. Apparently it's been bothering him for months, or even basically the entire 2.5 years since he had that accident. And so they report it's basically become too much to handle, and he's had to go in for like immediate surgery on his wrist to try and correct the issue, which brings up a couple questions. Firstly, you would imagine, would someone replace him for the Spanish Grand Prix? No. So no one for this race, which means just 19 cars for the race. It raises some questions. So will Lance be back for the next Grand Prix? 2 weeks now until round 10, which is the Canadian Grand Prix, Lance's home race. So, Formula 1 drivers and sports people in particular have a habit of coming back very quickly from surgeries. They give him some surgeries, make him some new wrists made out of steel, pump him full of drugs. There you go, Lance, back in the car, drive around in circles. Obviously, if you're a sports person, you should take a long recovery to get your body back into the right position. But your job is to turn up for these events and perform. And so sports athletes will just like push through the pain, even if they shouldn't, and come back kind of prematurely. So there's a chance he could be back in 2 weeks' time. If it's not going to be Lance in Canada, there's questions who would be replacing him. I believe it's the same weekend as Le Mans, 24 hours. And Felipe Drugovich is in one of the teams. I don't know if he would drop out of Le Mans for a chance to drive in Formula 1. Probably. So then it's maybe, Valtteri Bottas or someone else like that. They would get someone in. They're not just going to enter one car for Canada. So there's a number of people it could be. We can't say for sure, and we don't even know. Like, Lance may just be back. Like, you can just build people entirely new iron skeletons and then give them all the codeine in the Western Hemisphere and be like, there you go, mate. So we don't know what's going to go on for the next race, basically. But it raises some other questions. It makes me question, could this be a catalyst for Lance Stroll retiring, basically stepping away from Formula 1? Like, I think lots of people still see Lance as like a young guy. But Lance is one of the most tenured Formula 1 drivers. He's been around since 2016. He's been here a long time, and he's had an above-average career. He's got pole position. I mean, as accolades go, that's the main one. But most people don't. Like, he's had a hell of a career in Formula 1. And I personally think watching Lance Stroll in these last few years, he just doesn't look like he's having any kind of fun. He doesn't seem like he's having fun in the car. He certainly doesn't seem like he's having fun talking to the media. But then again, you don't get that impression from most of the drivers. But it kind of just seems like he's over it now in Formula 1. It kind of just seems like he doesn't want to be here. And so I've been questioning for a while, like, will Lance just like hang up his helmet and just like step away? Like following this season even. And now that he's had this, now he's got more complications with his wrist, going in for surgery, protracted recovery from that, maybe having to come back and like drive, with pain, severe pain, to go and drive in a sport that you no longer particularly want to take part in. Could this be the catalyst for Lance Stroll just saying like, yeah, nah, I'm just not going to do it anymore, and just retiring, like even now, basically mid-season? I think it's a strong possibility, and it's something we have to watch out for. Obviously, Aston Martin will have contingency plans for this. They'll have someone in mind to take over if Lance was to never drive again. And all Formula 1 teams would have this, because you have to work on, you have to plan for what if my driver is in like a helicopter crash and cannot drive anymore because they're dead. Or, for various reasons, you have to have a plan. So every team will have someone lined up who at least they want to drive their car. But I genuinely think there is a chance Lance steps away, like following this surgery. So we shall see in the next couple of weeks. Or, there's a chance he comes back for the rest of this season, but then if he's in pain, he just decides to call 2025 his last year in the sport. That would be fair enough as well. But yeah, I think Lance Stroll retirement is a serious possibility now. One to watch for the rest of this year. So, Sunday, we get to the race. 19 drivers, as there's only one Aston Martin car. Overnight, Red Bull elect to do some work on Yuki Tsunoda's car, try and improve the balance of his car, make it a little bit more drivable for him. They changed the rear end of the car, the rear wing, I want to say. He gets a pit lane start, but other than that, no penalties, no nothing. We come to the grid to start the Spanish Grand Prix. Unlike previous years in Spain, everyone gets through turn 1 cleanly. There's a couple moves up and down. A notable one for me, both Saubers managing to make some moves on the opening lap. As we get into lap 2, we had both Saubers basically hanging around P10. Bortoleto made a couple places up, but Nico Hülkenberg made like 5 places on the opening lap. He did kind of cut across turn 2, but that was deemed to be that was deemed to have like no penalty for that. He's not the only person who does it. Barcelona turn 1 is kind of weird, and everyone crunches up on the apex of turn 1, and so loads of people get like run out of room and they have to go across the inside of turn 2. There's a specific path you have to take. Like, it happens loads. So like multiple people go across turn 2, including Nico Hülkenberg, but he manages to somehow make up tons of places through the first lap. So we get both Saubers like immediately scratching on the back of the points after just the first lap, which is very impressive from them. Like, anyone can get lucky on the opening lap, but for both cars to start making up places, Sauber was looking like they actually had a decent race car this weekend. Bortoleto was looking pretty racy, but he had some unfortunate things in the race, and he didn't quite have the pace of Hülkenberg, so he dropped down again. He ended up finishing this thing P12, which is not bad from a P12 start. But, you know, Sauber in previous years would have fallen back there. So you can't complain about that one too much. But Nico Hülkenberg, after a very good first lap, just continued going forwards, clawed his way up into the top 10, and just genuinely had good race pace in the green car. Like the light green and black car, not the Aston Martin. Where did this come from? What have you done, Sauber? I had a prediction at the start of this year that Sauber might start to come along through this year. Obviously, that team has been taken over by Audi for 2026. And so I had a feeling that behind the scenes, Audi might be starting to pump in some financial investments, but also trying to put in some like management and stuff already this year to try and get the team in a reasonable position for their takeover, because you don't want to join the grid as the slowest team. That's just not fun. So I had a feeling Audi would be trying to like maneuver some things so the team was like, well, not 10th to end this year. And yet it seems like Sauber is making some progress because Hülkenberg had pace. And so by the end of this thing, we ended up with a late safety car. Hülkenberg was basically running in P6. And actually, kind of skipping forwards towards the end, after we had a safety car restart, Hülkenberg is P6 on the back of Hamilton, who was P5, and he overtakes him. Like, same tyre strategy, same stint, same tyre life. A Sauber overtakes a Ferrari just straight up on pace. Now, Hamilton was struggling a bit in the race, don't get me wrong. He's still, you know, not fully comfortable with that Ferrari in race trim or in qualifying, but he had an okay qualifying. So yeah, but still, a Sauber, Lewis. But yeah, all hats off to Hülkenberg. Gets around Hamilton to take P5, and then actually, for things that we will discuss in a second, penalties, gets around Hamilton to take P6, but then penalties promote him up into P5. Nico Hülkenberg in a Sauber, P5. It's just absolutely ludicrous. We've obviously had things like the Williams coming in those kind of positions in races so far. But a Williams is a step above a Sauber, or at least we thought it was. That feels like it shouldn't happen. And this wasn't like, you know, Brazil last year or Hungary 2021, which was so mixed up that basically anyone could finish anywhere. There were a couple DNFs in this race, but all in all, it was a relatively normal race despite a late safety car. So it's not like Hülkenberg just got supremely lucky and then was able to hold, you know, people behind him for 50 laps. He just slowly and surely climbed his way through the grid and just got up there on pace. I just still can't believe it. I'm recording this. It's about 2.5 hours since the race ended, and I'm still in shock. What is happening here? I will say, Driver of the Day vote did not go to Nico Hülkenberg. My man made up 11 places from the starting grid to finish a Sauber with 10 points towards the constructors' standings, and you don't get a Driver of the Day for that? What do I have to do to get Driver of the Day? Like, do I personally have to bribe every single viewer of this sport? What does Nico have to do to please you lot? That is insane. It was one of the most impressive drives I've seen in a very long time. So, Nico Hülkenberg, Driver of the Day, in my heart. Absolutely shafted by the fans at home. So, yeah, he doing very well. Some other things going on in this race. We start this thing off, Piastri on pole, Norris behind him, Verstappen behind him. Actually, on the opening lap, Verstappen does get ahead of Lando Norris, but no one challenges Oscar Piastri. He gets through turns 1, 2, 3 clean, and then he just disappeared. So 10 laps in, Oscar Piastri is, 4 seconds up the road. It looked like there was no touching Oscar today. He wasn't challenged opening lap. He just drove off into the sunset. One of those races where we just didn't see him on the TV at all. He got involved in absolutely nothing because he was just so far up the road from anyone else. And that's kind of what you want as a driver. It's obviously not interesting as a spectator, but like fully unchallenged for the win of this race. There was also some question marks with a late safety car, but Oscar Piastri just basically lights to flag, dominated this race. He didn't lead every lap just due to pit strategies. Verstappen was in the lead for some of them, but yeah, phenomenal drive from Oscar Piastri. You know who also had a very entertaining drive Fernando Alonso. So Fernando Alonso is still on his quest for his first points in 2025. I should say before this race. Spoilers, maybe. Still on his quest for his first points in 2025. Has a very good qualifying, gets his Aston Martin up into Q3. And, you know, that car's been maybe 8th fastest for lots this year. Not fantastic, but he gets up into Q3, puts in a very good qualifying lap, respectable P10, can't be angry with that. Has an okay opening lap, actually drops down a couple of places, but he's still in the mix, like around sort of P10 position. He's making overtakes. He, like 3 or 4 times made an overtake on different people around turn 3 at Catalonia, which is not an easy place to make an overtake on someone. Swinging it around a corner where you're experiencing, what, like 3-4 G-forces the entire way through. Not an easy corner just to drive through, let alone overtake someone through, so fair play. Fernando Alonso was putting on a show. It did a little trip through the gravel, doing a little parade lap, waving to the fans, getting up close. He stupidly did that halfway through the race, which obviously cost him a couple of places, but, you know, gotta entertain the people somehow. Yeah, Fernando Alonso seemed to spend this entire race overtaking everybody, but somehow just hanging around in like P10, P11 even the entire time. But towards the end, he claws his way back up, gets up into P10 somehow, with the safety car restart, just ekes his way in there. And so it did not come easy, but Fernando Alonso battled his way to 1 point in this race. But then actually, we'll talk about in a second, Max Verstappen gets a penalty, gets himself bumped down to P10, so Fernando Alonso claws his way into 2 points at the Spanish Grand Prix. He's off the board. No more nil points for Fernando Alonso. My God, it was not easy for him, and it took 9 rounds of the championship, but he's got 2 points. Oscar Piastri, on the other hand, just sneezes and he gets 2 points. But Fernando Alonso is still, I'm sure he's going to be partying in Barcelona after that one. It was a long time coming, but it was well deserved. A couple other things. Alex Albon got caught up in a couple of things. Actually collides with, I believe, with Liam Lawson twice. So Alex Albon has a collision, basically opening lap, comes in on just one of the first few laps, replaces his front wing, and then on lap 26, collides with Liam Lawson again at turn 1. So Liam actually made a very good move, goes around basically the outside of Albon. Albon trying to keep alongside, then going into the left-hander of turn 2. The cars just come together. Alex Albon loses his left front end plate. And I think basically the team had no more front wings. And so, because they had also replaced one front wing on Sainz's car. So I think Williams literally just had no more. And they must have decided that they would just have had no race pace with no front wing and like absolutely no hopes of achieving any points or anything in this race. And so they just retired the car. Sad weekend for Albon. But these are the things that happen if you get too close to Liam Lawson, basically. Lawson, once again, scrappy weekend. But they always are for Liam Lawson. That's just kind of his style. As I've said, he does remind me of like an early Max Verstappen. You know, like a 2015, 16, 17 Max Verstappen. But we should note, Max Verstappen at the time made a lot of people very unhappy. And Liam Lawson is going to be doing the same thing. He is not going to be a popular bunny in the F1 paddock because he just gets into, I was going to say conundrums, confrontations, shenanigans, tomfoolery, hijinks with every other driver on the grid, basically. There isn't really anyone that he hasn't collided with at this point. Liam Lawson is making enemies up and down the place. And actually, it was quite funny to watch this race because Liam Lawson, again, was around that kind of P10 mark, was just getting scrappy with every single driver around him. And basically the whole race, Fernando Alonso was using that to his advantage. He was using Lawson as like a little like guard dog, like a little scrappy terrier, sending him off. And so Alonso was hanging behind Lawson. Lawson would go in, dive bomb someone at turn 1, you know, chip a piece of carbon off their car. Both of them get sideways or like annoy them going through whatever random turn. And Alonso, when they started battling, would just rock up and try and overtake them both. And Alonso was doing this for most of the race. He was just hanging behind Lawson, letting Lawson get into trouble, and then just like helping himself to a free overtake when Lawson like runs someone off the road. So you can't say Fernando Alonso is not a cerebral racing driver. That was very funny to watch. And in the end, yeah, it works out. They both get up there. So Liam Lawson actually finishes P11 in the end. Alonso gets past him. But it worked out kind of okay for both of them. Other good races. Pierre Gasly had a very good weekend. He qualifies P8, finishes P8. He would have finished P9 if it wasn't for Max Verstappen. But very good in the Alpines. Solid points for them. They're clawing their way back up to kind of that kind of P5, 6, 7 constructor battle where they really should be. I will say that's not great for Franco Colapinto because Colapinto, yeah, he qualified P19 and managed to get back up to P15, but there were 2 people DNF'd, so really that's like a P17 finish. When your teammate is consistently up in the points and scoring 4 points for the team, that's going to start reflecting badly on you. Colapinto didn't crash or anything, but he's a long way off Gasly, and so I'd have no idea what the politics are within Alpine, but if it was purely on race pace, I would be looking at other available options for the end of this 5-race stint. Let me put it that way. Other things. I guess we got to talk about Max Verstappen. So Max Verstappen, differently to basically everyone else, went for a 3-stop strategy in this race. He said after the race that they kind of had to because they had high degradation. So basically elected to push a lot harder in each of their stints, make more stops, but make up the place by just doing faster laps throughout the race. Makes sense. So he was doing a 3-stop. Everyone else was basically doing a 2-stop. And actually, for lots of the race, it looked like it was working. So the McLarens are out front. Piastri P1, Norris P2. But Verstappen was coming at them, and he was coming at them in such a way, and it looked like there could be a battle between Verstappen and Norris, or even Verstappen, Norris, and Piastri come the end of this race. It looked like Verstappen was making this work. But, close to the end of this thing, did I write down the lap? I don't think I did. But Kimi Antonelli, engine explodes. He was coming into turn 10. Kaisha, the new, like, big, long left-hander, turns in, and then you can hear on his onboards, it sounds real nasty. His engine just fully cuts out. Nothing doing in that car. He just rolls it into the gravel. Safety car while they recover his vehicle, which did kind of screw over a few people. It kind of screwed over Max Verstappen, who was making it work on the tyres he had and on his 3-stop strategy, but didn't have any more soft tyres available, which basically everyone else in the top, like 6 or 10 even, did. So Max Verstappen gets kind of screwed with that, looking like he could have been fighting for P2, maybe P1, without that safety car, but these things happen in Formula 1, so we all line up. Basically, everyone takes a pit stop, all of the top runners onto softs, except for Max Verstappen, who didn't have any, and so pits onto hards. For those of you new to Formula 1, hard tyre, slower than soft tyre. Max Verstappen, sad. And so we have quite a protracted period under the safety car. We also have to clear Antonelli's car, then let all the lap cars through, and it took a good 2 or 3 laps just for the lap cars to get back around to the back of the pack, which means when we went racing again, we only had about 5 racing laps, maybe 6, but not long from green flag until the end of this race, which means it was a pure sprint on soft tyres, but hard tyres for Max Verstappen. And so as we get going again, Oscar Piastri leads the pack out, blasts it, a couple corners before the end of this thing. Max Verstappen obviously trying to fling it through the final corner as fast as possible to not lose out of his hard tyres. Gets a bit squirmish on the exit curbs of the final corner of Barcelona. Gets sideways and allows Leclerc to come right alongside him and actually pass him down the main straight as we go racing once again. So Max Verstappen loses P3 to Leclerc, obviously not happy about that. And actually, it meant George Russell was right on the back of them both as well. And so coming into turn 1, Leclerc gets through on Verstappen before turn 1, basically. He's going through, and then Russell tries to seize the opportunity, get through as well. Gets alongside Verstappen under braking, is more or less alongside him as they come into the apex. I hate that we have to discuss this, but is more or less alongside him coming into the apex. But then George's gets a little bit squirmy, like catches the brakes a bit, locks up a little bit, steps the car out, bumps into Verstappen, which then like pushes Verstappen to run over the inside of turn 2, much like Nico Hulkenberg at the start of this race, takes the escape road, yada yada yada, stays ahead of George Russell. But Verstappen quite rightly diagnosed that George had bumped into him, and at that point, if a car like bounces you, if they bonk you, if you get bonked, it's very reasonable that you can't stay on a racing line to stay on the track, because you're at the limit of grip anyway, and then if someone comes in and slaps you around the side of the head, well, it's gonna knock you off, isn't it? It's gonna knock you off outside the track. And so he was well within his rights to take across the inside of turn 2 and stay ahead of George Russell there. But a couple laps later, Red Bull on the radio tell Max Verstappen to give the place to George Russell. Max Verstappen very unhappy about this, and rightly so, because as I said, he correctly identified that he didn't need to do that, but when you're the driver, you have to have some faith in your team, because your team can see a lot more than you can. For all Max Verstappen knows, it wasn't Russell that hit him, it was some other thing, or, who knows what's going on. So the team says give the place back. Verstappen does not enjoy that one little bit, but decides, I will give the place back to George, and I'm going to give him a little message at the same time, a little piece of my mind. So coming into turn 5, Verstappen eases off, as if to let George Russell around the outside of him to take turn 5 first. But while he's kind of like over braking to slow the car down and let George Russell in front, he then comes off the brakes and allows his car just to roll into George as he starts to turn into turn 5. Intentional collision? Well, yes, basically. I was trying to leave that up for debate, but no, pretty guaranteed to be an intentional collision by Max Verstappen there. George Russell actually doesn't get around him, doesn't get in front of him that corner, but Max does then let him through later on in the lap, and so Russell is up into P4, Verstappen is in P5, but apparently it is frowned upon to intentionally slam your car into someone else's car. Who would have known? Who would have known that driving into someone in a car that can do over 200 miles an hour is bad? And so quite rightly, Max Verstappen was handed a 10-second penalty. It is interesting because that would seem like maybe not harsh enough for intentionally causing a collision, because there's causing a collision and then there's like intentionally causing a collision. And it's one thing to try and overtake someone and misjudge it and like ram into the side of their car, but when you're letting someone through and you drive into them, there's no arguing that you like lost control or didn't realize the braking power or etc, etc. It kind of has to be intentional. And so it screams much more, it's reminiscent of Schumacher on Villeneuve in whatever that was, 97, things like this, for which Michael Schumacher was disqualified from the season. That one was obviously a little bit different because that was Michael Schumacher trying to prevent Jacques Villeneuve from finishing or winning a race in which he would overtake Schumacher for the title. So that was maybe a little bit more cynical, but, it's still driving into another car. And so we've had instances in the past where people have done that and been disqualified from not just that race, but the entire season. And so, people on the commentary talking about, was 10 seconds enough for this? I'm actually not going to answer that question. I don't have an opinion on that. I think there's so many different things that come into it, and I'm not a steward. You know what? The whole point of this podcast is for me to give my opinion. I personally believe. What do I personally believe? I personally believe that 10 seconds is okay, but also if they had gone like one step up, that would have also been okay. So if they had maybe, because I guess one step up from 10 seconds, they would have to give him like a drive-through, but then applied at the end of the race would just be 30 seconds. So it would be 30 seconds. Either way, it near enough bumps him fully out of the points, because you have to take into consideration that we've just had a safety car and the field is all bunched up. Because if you're leading the Grand Prix by like over 30 seconds, a 10-second penalty means nothing. And so you kind of have to give penalties depending on where in the race and how the race is looking. So I think that was kind of fine. But one thing I should note is that after the race, stewards released their documents, and Max Verstappen has received 3 penalty points onto his license for this, which is, as far as I'm aware, the most you can get, unless it's some like crazy, unless you like punch someone in the face in an interview. But I'm pretty sure this is about the most you can get for like a single collision with another driver. So Max Verstappen does pick up 3 penalty points, and interesting to note, that means he now has 11 on his license. 12 being the number you have to get yourself a race ban. So Max Verstappen has obviously fallen a bit further back in the drivers' championship, but he's still kind of in there. He's still third in the drivers' championship, and with a couple lucky races or like a McLaren DNF, he could be right back in there, right at the spicy end of the drivers' championship. If he picks up a race ban in this season, that is going to be wild. For both him and for Red Bull, who are right in the midst of a spicy constructors battle in the P2-3-4 championship. So that is an interesting one to watch for Max Verstappen. Yeah, I think... No, I'm thinking about it now. I think it should have been more. I think it should have been a drive-through converted into a 30 seconds at the end of the race. It would have made a 1 point difference to Max, because it would have changed him from being P10 down to, or basically P18. But yeah, I think actually 10 seconds is not enough, because it was very deliberate, and there's not even like a sporting justification. And that sounds weird to say, but I mean, it's understandable from a sporting point of view to do certain things to try and like hinder your competitors. Like, you shouldn't do that, but other racing drivers can understand at least the human urge to want to try and like illegally block someone, move under braking, weave on the straights. That's at least understandable, and everyone has had those thoughts in a race. They're like, oh, maybe I should do that and see if I can get away with it. There's no justification for pretending to let someone past and then just like bumping into their car. There's no reason, there's no benefit to doing that. So it's just completely cynical. Yeah, no, looking back on it, it should be more than 10 seconds. Stewards, sort your life out. And so, as we get to the checkered flag in this race, our finishing order is Oscar Piastri wins the Spanish Grand Prix ahead of Lando Norris. Charles Leclerc then gets himself up into the podium, starts P7, gets up into P3. Not a bad weekend for Mr. Leclerc after a disappointing qualifying. George Russell, despite having a Max Verstappen-shaped hole in the side of his car, finishes P4. Nico Hülkenberg finishes P6 on the road, but gets promoted up to P5 with Max Verstappen's penalty. 10 points for Sauber. More than doubles their team total up until this point, which is wild for that team. And also, Hülkenberg had 6 championship points before this race, so he's increased his total by... What percentage is that? 160%? Lots. He's increased his total by lots and jumped himself way up in the driver's standings, now currently sitting in P11 in the driver's standings, ahead of Lance Stroll. So just huge. But anyway, yeah, Nico Hülkenberg is classified P5 ahead of Lewis Hamilton P6. Isaac Hadjar goes from P9 up to P7. Excellent again for him. Just slowly racking up those points for RB, kind of securing them. Nice little P6 at the moment in the team's standings. We'll do championship watch in a second. But yes, P6 for RB. Pierre Gasly gets P8 from a start of P8. Fernando Alonso does get P9. Max Verstappen does still get 1 point. Technically, the time I started recording this, there is one more incident that Max Verstappen was called to the steward's office for on the safety car restart, as he got sideways and then Charles Leclerc went around him. Those cars did bump, they did collide ever so slightly going down the main straight. I don't think there's anything I don't think anyone's going to get a penalty for that, but in theory, that's been looked at by the stewards, and so in theory, he could get a further penalty, but I really doubt that's going to happen. So Max Verstappen gets 1 point for P10, then ahead of Lawson, Bortoleto, Tsunoda, who is the fourth out of 4 Red Bull drivers. Again, I want to say, not great. Sainz P14, so yeah, Williams just not having a good weekend. Colapinto 15, Ocon 16, and Oliver Behrman 17. Haas, the two final cars on the road. Will my prediction of Haas P10 come true? I hope so. I don't like being wrong, but it's certainly turning out that way. And so I think that's a good time to bring us into Championship Watch, because while we haven't had a change at the top of the drivers' standings, there is, some storylines to look out for here. So in our drivers' standings, Oscar Piastri is still leading. He was leading going into this race, and then he won this race, and so, mathematically, he is still leading. He is currently leading the Drivers' Championship with 186 points. Norris is still P2 on 176, now 10 points behind once more. Max Verstappen is still in the third, but he only picks up 1 point this weekend and bumps himself up to 137, which means he is now 49 points behind Piastri. Now, in the past couple podcasts, I have said that I consider within 25 points to be like a serious contender for the driver's title. 49 is more than 25. And so it's getting a bit sketchy for Max Verstappen, like whether he is still in contention for this driver's standings. If he had managed to hold on to third for this race, he would obviously have picked up 14 points more, but he would still be 35 points away from Oscar. And so still outside of that 25 point thing. And so yeah, it's gonna take some like major luck for Red Bull. Either they come along technically and they have some very good weekends, maybe their car is just really good in Canada and he wins that race and like a couple of races in the middle third of this season. And that would start to turn things around. Or, if we have a McLaren double DNF a la Mercedes in Spain 2016, and Max Verstappen picks up a 25-point swing, that would bring him right back into it. But at the moment, 49 points behind is getting kind of just out of serious contention. It's getting kind of into the range that Lando Norris was in last year, when obviously people were saying he was in a championship battle with Max, but he wasn't. He really wasn't. And so yeah, kind of pivotal for the Drivers' Championship now, and it means McLaren is free. They don't really have to worry about Max so much for the next few races at least, and McLaren is, at this point in time, guaranteed to win the drivers' standings. We just don't know with who, but at the moment, my money's on Oscar. George Russell in P4 in the driver standings on 111. He's therefore 75 points behind Oscar. But another couple weekends like this, and he will overtake Max Verstappen for P3. Charles Leclerc in 5th with 94. Ferrari is coming along well. They're actually jumping up, which brings us on to the team's standings. So, unsurprisingly, McLaren is massively out on the lead in the constructor standings. I think I said it last weekend. Just give them the trophy now. No one's catching them in the constructors. It's just a ludicrous haul of points. So they're on 362, over double P2, which now, in a big swing, is Ferrari. Ferrari was P4 in the team standings before this weekend, and things have all shuffled around. Ferrari with a good haul of points, Charles Leclerc, another podium, bumps them up to 165, 6 points ahead of Mercedes now. Mercedes on 159, and Red Bull Racing, who had an opportunity to jump up into P2 in the standings, have instead fallen down to P4 in the standings, 144 points. But between Red Bull and Ferrari, there's still only 21 points. And so that fight for P2, 3 and 4 in the constructors is, I believe, going to continue for the entire season. And it's important. It is very, very key for those teams to fight to make that difference between P4 and P2. So they are all going to be going at it. That is an interesting battle to watch as 2025 progresses. You'll love to see it. Williams is still kind of in no man's land in P5, but obviously they scored nothing this weekend, which means behind them, we've got some teams kind of bunching up, vying for P6, and maybe trying to launch off and take a run on Williams for P5. Let's see later in the season. But RB, Racing Bulls, is on 28. Haas is on 26, but they don't score any this weekend, which means RB has jumped over them. And Kick, with their 10 points from Hulkenberg, is now up into P8. They were in P10 before this, and they've leapfrogged Aston Martin and Alpine to take P8 in the in the constructors, which means they're level on points of Aston Martin, but best finish decides who goes ahead, and Hulkenberg's P5 is the best finish, many of those teams. And so Alpine, once again, the team that may well have the 5th fastest car this year, is in P10 in the Constructors again. Alpine, you scored points. You scored 4 points. How have you managed this? What are you doing? And so, yeah, it's never sunny. It's never sunny in Enstone. But I still believe that's going to turn around. It's going to be really interesting which team finishes P10 in the Constructors. My money's on Haas just because I said it in my predictions and I don't like being wrong. But I could see that happening, you know. Kick might have a couple of races like this, score some more points. Aston Martin should score some more points. Like Fernando Alonso's got the taste for it now. Alpine are scoring points on a relatively consistent basis, but only ever like 1 or 2 at a time. And it means they just can't outpace like 10 points for Hulkenberg. And so, yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting Constructors battle throughout this year. It's looking good. As I said, we now have 1 week off before we then have the Canadian Grand Prix on the 15th of June, and therefore another Camping Chair Chat for that. There should be one in the off week next weekend. I will find something to talk about, and some other bizarre location to be in. Tune in next weekend to see where that will be. But until then, I've been Mr. V, and I'll Mr. C you later.